Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we have Lauren Barker, who is the CEO of Uresta. Uresta is a Canadian FemTech organization that is addressing bladder leaks and urinary incontinence in women using a reusable pessary device that doesn't affect the day-to-day of its users. Uresta was originally founded by a Canadian urogynecologist, but at that time, the company struggled with their sales. In 2014, the company was then acquired by a group of female entrepreneurs that tried to bring the product to the market. Lauren left her career in finance in 2020 and joined Uresta after she was intrigued by the potential this product had to improve the quality of life in women suffering from bladder leaks. Shortly after, Lauren was appointed as the CEO and has been heavily involved with consumer research and creating the go-to-market strategy for launch in Canada and also plans to launch internationally. Lauren shares how she has been able to navigate the problem space that affects many women around the world by sparking conversations with patients and health professionals to grow organically. She also gives tips to entrepreneurs that at some point would require regulatory approval for their products, whether that's the FDA or Health Canada. Lauren has been very involved with the entrepreneurial groups in Canada, including FemTech Canada and the Mars Discovery District, and she shares how she has been able to rely on the entrepreneurial community for support and to continuously learn in this new stage of her career. Hope you all enjoy this one. Hi, Lauren. Welcome to Scalpels and Spreadsheets.
Hi, Aman. Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm good as well, thanks. And where are you located?
So I'm actually located in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
How's the weather there recently?
Actually, it's pretty warm for this time of year. I think we have the least amount of snow that I've seen for early December.
Mhm. I'm actually located in Toronto and it's been pretty warm here as well.
Yes, I've heard
Yeah,
there's been like Toronto summer weather.
more or less.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the way I wanted to kick this off was just hearing about your story, before you joined Uresta, just so the audience really knows what your background was. So would you like to just kick off by telling us, what you've done in the past and how you actually got to the point where you are now?
totally. So today I'll just kind of talk a little bit about Uresta at a very high level. But so today I'm the CEO of Uresta, which is a solution for stress urinary incontinence in women, which I'm sure we'll talk about more later on. And I partnered with the founding physician who invented the product, and I'm sure we'll touch on him as well later on. But my background is actually not in healthcare. I first started my career in investment banking at TD and then went on to work at private equity at TorQuest Partners. So my career is very much more traditional finance, but through my experience in investment banking and also private equity, like I got the opportunity to work and meet top executive of companies, many of which were entrepreneurs themselves. And so I always found that side of the business really inspiring. And it was actually through my time at TorQuest Partners. So I'm the CEO of Uresta, but our chief operating officer is actually a former colleague of mine from TorQuest as well. So we have a similar background and we partnered together on Uresta.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you
Yeah.
said briefly that you partner with the founding partner of Uresta. Could you
Yeah.
talk about how that experience was?
Yeah, for sure. So, Uresta was invented. I'll give a little bit of story on him and
Hmm.
Uresta and how I came into play and how our chief operating officer Sam came into play. So, Uresta was invented by a physician that's based in Halifax. His name's Dr. Scott Farrell. He was a urogynecologist, so he was actually doing a lot of surgery for pelvic organ prolapse or stress urinary incontinence. He was actually, fun fact, he was the third ever urogynecologist in Canada. So when he started, it was very, very specialized what he was doing. Today, there's probably over 100. So he's actually trained a lot of the urogynecologists in Canada. A lot of people know him by name. He's been a medical
Hmm.
professor. He's written textbooks on pessaries. So he's very well known in Canada. But what he was finding is there was these devices called pessaries, which are basically intravaginal devices that support pelvic organs from within. So they're inserted into the vagina and they can support, the urethra, the uterus, all different types of organs, and it will help with pelvic organ prolapse and it'll help with stress incontinence. What he was finding is a lot of these women were having a hard time managing it on their own. And he was also finding that there was a lot of women struggling with stress urinary incontinence. So he took the pessary, which is something that's been around for decades, and he adapted it so that it could be self-managed by the woman herself. And what that means is that he wanted to take away the physician process, because wait lists were long then, they're even longer now, but it's also just an uncomfortable experience to also go through. So he developed it in a way that women could size and fit themselves, and they wouldn't need to go to that physician for a prescription or for a fitting, and so that it could be fully over the counter. Now, this is actually something he invented kind of well over a decade ago. And it was something that he had sort of worked with. And actually, his wife, who was a nurse, helped him as well. And they ran the company for a few years, but really struggled to, I think, amazing product, brought it through clinical studies, through regulatory approvals. I mean, the data to support its efficacy and safety was super strong, but they just really struggled on building the right go-to-market strategy and executing on that strategy. And so they were kind of at a point where they just weren't getting any traction sales wise, despite it being an amazing product and filling a need that was really being unaddressed by over-the-counter solutions. And so Q, kind of where I came into play, is my business partner, Sam, our chief operating officer, actually had a connection to the family physician. So he's from New Brunswick. Our founding physician is from Halifax. Through the kind of East Coast network, they sort of got connected. And at the time, Uresta was looking for funding. And I, one of the few women in the office, Sam, came up to me and said, I'd really would like to get your thoughts on something that I've been connected with, this company. And so I started looking at Uresta, and I was just like super intrigued by the product. I was shocked that the mainstream solutions for managing bladder leakage or stress urinary incontinence is disposable pads. And to me, that just seemed so archaic. And I really struggled to understand why the business hadn't been successful, why they hadn't been able to generate revenue. And so, what I think at the time was just like a lot of curiosity turned into kind of a 2-year learning about Uresta, getting to know the physician, getting to know Dr. Farrell, getting to understand the market, to ultimately quitting my job to run it. That's the Coles Notes version.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So you actually didn't really anticipate yourself being in healthcare. It's just that, you had this opportunity come in front of you. Did you ever consider being in entrepreneurship before Uresta came along?
Yeah, like it's interesting. I think, healthcare wise, it's funny, like I do come from a family of doctors. My dad's a physician. I think kind of growing up, I thought that I would just go into medical school. Obviously, hard pivot into investment banking. But I think what kind of intrigued me the most about Uresta was that it was helping women. Like it's not bladder leakage isn't a life-threatening disease, right? But it's a huge quality of life issue. And I think having the opportunity to meet entrepreneurs through like my previous job, I was always inspired by their story. I've always sort of tinkered with ideas in the past. Like I've never fully launched a company, but I had a couple business ideas that I researched and worked on for a while prior to Uresta. And at the center of each of those business ideas were helping women, not necessarily in a healthcare sense, but I think kind of looking back on it now, I think I'm more entrepreneurial than I realized, or interested in it than I had realized at the time.
Yeah. And in terms of, just understanding the problem as well, obviously, like bladder incontinence is something that affects a lot of women. A lot of people have this notion that it's only elderly women, but it actually does start, pretty early on for a lot of people, and it's a pretty common problem.
Yeah.
So, what is it like trying to solve a problem for, a lot of women that actually go through this, but having a topic that doesn't necessarily get, so much attention?
Totally. And I will just touch quickly on the statistics because it is quite prevalent. So the data suggests that 1 in 3 women after the age of 30 experience this type of bladder leakage. And this is leaks when a woman coughs, laughs, sneezes, jumps, runs.
Mhm.
And it's as many as 1 in 2 by time of menopause, and 50% of women when working out. So it's very, very common. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's only related to having children. Children obviously play a huge role in it, but is actually can be caused by hormonal fluctuations. I actually know a lot of women who experience this only right before their period due to the drop in estrogen. And it's also just an age related issue as well. But I think in terms of the product itself, I think being an entrepreneur is tough. There are highs, there are lows, but I think what really motivates us is I think we sort of knew going into running Uresta that like this product was going to have a really positive impact on women's lives. But I have been just blown away by like the emails or the messages we'll get on social media from women who have struggled for, in some cases, 20 years. Like there's women who have had the surgery and it hasn't been successful. Uresta is the only thing that worked. I mean, it's something that impacts women's confidence. It creates
Mhm.
anxiety. I mean, I've been told by women that they stopped running because they were peeing their pants every single time they ran. And so you're trying to do something good for yourself, be active, and then you're having this issue, right? So, I mean, it's in so many ways it impacts women, and I think that is like, and it impacts them in so many areas of their life and so many women, and just to get their messages is like the biggest motivation.
Mhm. So when you look at the market right now, like there's a lot of solutions out there. Obviously, there isn't really a one size fits all. You will have companies that try to help you through online classes to just strengthen your pelvic
Mhm.
muscles. There's
Yeah.
companies that sell supplements, just to tighten those muscles again. There are companies that sell liners, which I think have been the traditional way, of trying to solve this problem. And then there's with the pessary. How has your company's growth strategy and, just market strategy deferred to your predecessors?
So, yeah, I think like there's a few different ways that the product can, or sorry, how the solution can be
Hmm.
addressed. So, and I think that's what's great about it is there's so many different um solutions and so many women that suffer from this, everyone can find the right solution for them, right? So, we all have opportunity to play in this space, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but I think there's kind of two sides of it. Basically, it's a muscle issue, as you indicated, right? So pelvic floor physio, because it is a muscle issue, pelvic floor physio is something that can help address the issue. It can be very hard for women to fully eliminate their leaks
Hmm.
with physio. Some women can get there, but some women, especially with exercise, find that they're not able to fully eliminate their leaks with physio. So this is where Uresta can be an absolutely great complement. What I say to women is like, if you were to go and sprain your ankle, for example, you would go and see a physiotherapist, and then you would also wear an ankle brace. Over time, you're going to do your physio, your ligaments are going to get stronger, and maybe you don't need to wear that brace anymore, or maybe you sometimes wear it when you're just playing sports. I like to think about Uresta the same way. It's just going to provide extra support to those muscles when you need it. But at the same time, it's not going to make your muscles stronger, but it will not make your muscles weaker either. So it's a
Hmm.
support tool. So that's how I see it with pelvic floor physio. When it comes to the other solutions on the market, I think a lot of them are, super convenient, but they're not really doing anything, right? So if you think of pads, you can get a pad very quickly, very cheaply, but a lot of women will get, it's one, they're uncomfortable, they're bulky, they smell, but it can contribute to rashes, it can cause UTIs. It's really not great for women. And I would say, like, we've seen a little bit of innovation in this space when it comes to like sort of reusable leak proof underwear, which seems
Hmm.
to be, it's you see it in the menstruation market. Now we're seeing it in bladder leakage as well. But again, it's kind of similar to pads. And I would say that's how most women are looking to manage their leaks today. Of course, there's surgery as well. So that's always an option. Um, Obviously, surgery isn't for everyone, and it also depends, like if you wanting to have more kids. The wait lists in Canada right now are significant, and then there are some sort of medical spas that do offer certain kind of tightening treatments,
Hmm.
but can be quite cost prohibitive.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And how has it been for you to reach your audience right now?
So it's interesting because when we took over Uresta, it was just over 3 years ago, which was
Mhm.
during the pandemic. And so we had that sort of obstacle that we had to navigate. The other kind of biggest change that we made, my business partner and I, Sam, when we took over from the physician, was to really focus on actually going directly to the consumer versus going and educating physicians who then educate their patients about Uresta.
Mhm.
Now, what we're seeing and what we saw in a lot of our customer research is that a lot of women were already managing their leaks with over the counter options. So, 80% of them were buying pads or that reusable kind of absorbent underwear that I talked about, right? So, a lot of them were already in that over the counter market. And we were also limited by COVID. But what we were starting to see, which I think is super interesting, is that it's a very common issue, but it's also a very taboo issue, right? It's very embarrassing. It's very hard for women
Yeah.
to talk about it. But we're seeing that really improve. And I think in a lot of ways, social media sometimes gets a bad rep, but I think that there's a lot more awareness around like postpartum and self love and body image. And there's just like a lot of conversation going on online. And I also think what was interesting during the pandemic is a lot of pelvic floor physios who, and some of them, I built relationships with early on, and 3 years later, we now working together still, went to Instagram and Facebook during the pandemic because they weren't able to see their clients and they started creating a lot of resources just for free information. And I think it
Mhm.
really like encouraged the conversation around pelvic health. And it was kind of a great opportunity for us to start spreading the word about Uresta. So we today, majority of our um, kind of communication and marketing is through social media like Instagram or Facebook. In the last year and a half, we've done a lot more with physicians, but it has primarily been online.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to have something like this direct to consumer. And I think, starting this over the pandemic was also a benefit, right? Like if even if there were patients that considered, seeing a physician or considering
Mhm.
surgery, it wasn't necessarily possible during the pandemic, not only for the wait time, but obviously for, the reasons that you couldn't go see a physician. So there was more of a reliance on, looking for just over the counter options or getting something directly for the patient rather than having multiple touch points during that time. And I think that probably benefited Uresta as well. Since you've started the B2B, are there any differences in terms of your approach? Are there any benefits or disadvantages that you see?
Between B2B and direct to
And
consumer. Yeah.
and direct to consumer.
Yeah, I mean, we're still a very like lean team. I think educating physicians, I mean, it does take a significant investment capital wise. So you see a lot of, the traditional pharmaceutical route of like having a lot of sales reps and following up. I would say we've tried to do it probably more organically. So we have, for example, I would say we're more targeting either pelvic floor physiotherapists. We're trying to do a lot more with family physicians and then gynecologists or urogynecologists. And kind of initially what was happening, which was I think super interesting, was obviously we were targeting women on Facebook and Instagram, and either women were doctors themselves, would see an ad for Uresta, had this issue, would purchase
Mhm.
Uresta, and then would go, "Oh my god, this product is so amazing! I need to offer this to my patients." So we started. We get regular inbounds from female physicians wanting to learn more about Uresta and how they can offer it to their patients. Then we started to see women bring it up with their doctor. So we don't have a traditional sales rep model. I think at one point we would like to invest in that, but a
Mhm.
lot of our physician or B2B education is organically coming from into is inbounds. So it's a pretty interesting dynamic. So we've sort of encourage that. And as soon as we get an inbound, we offer up a 30-minute Zoom onboarding session. We send them a demo of the product. We send them marketing materials. And then we often ask, like, what colleagues are you willing to introduce us to? And it's been a really scrappy way to grow, but it's working. And I'd say the only other thing we've really done on the physician side is we've started to attend some conferences in Canada. So we just attended like the Family Medicine Forum in Montreal, and that was a great way to engage and talk with a number of physicians there. But I think it's been interesting. You generally need a significant amount of capital to go after that market, but I've been pleasantly surprised how we've been able to be quite scrappy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's amazing to hear. And I think
Yeah.
one of the reasons why physicians were always just a bit more open to a pessary is that, physicians will have a better understanding about, how safe they can be, the fact that they could be more of a one size fits all
Yeah.
versus alternative options where you have to consider things like, how many kids you've had, how many kids you want in the future, and other considerations as well. And I guess for patients, it's just having that uncertainty, right? Whether something like this is safe, whether this is the best approach or if there's something else that can be done before trying to use an insertable. And I think, having physicians vouch for the products and try using it themselves or, give it to the patients is a good way to just build that confidence. I have a question about, your marketing around the solution.
Yeah.
Obviously bladder incontinence would be considered taboo by a lot of women. And I've actually worked in a company that's tried to address the same problem in the past based in
Okay.
London. And I
Yeah.
think the way they did it was just having that conversation, talking about things that are purposely taboo to see if anyone, willingly comes up and actually wants to continue that conversation. Have you had any challenges marketing something like this? And what about getting customer feedback? Have there been challenges getting feedback from users for a product like this when, they might not feel comfortable talking about a product?
Totally. Yeah, it's 100% a huge barrier. We've tackled it a few different ways. I would say, like, when we first kind of started out, what we've noticed, and I think again this is just kind of speaking to changes on social media, cultural changes, that sort of thing, but women in their 30s and 40s seem very open to talking about this. 50 plus, it's very hard. And I think something that's also really interesting is, from my customer research and from talking to women, a lot of women think this is like an elderly issue. Like the number of women that are like,
Mhm.
oh, my grandma has this, or this is like my mom has this issue. But there's a lot of women in their 30s and 40s suffering from that. So one of the first things that we did was really try to focus some of our video testimonials. And if you go on our Instagram page, you will see that we have a lot of video testimonials, and they have been so valuable. And we were looking for younger women in their 30s and 40s to talk about it, but it seems like those are the ones that have been willing to actually speak about it. And there's something about seeing a woman who's, fit, young, talking about the fact that this is something she suffers from and she uses Uresta, that's really helped to destigmatize it. And it's also
Mhm.
helped women feel like, oh, okay, I'm in my 30s. I shouldn't be so ashamed. So that has been one big part of it. I think for some women who have suffered from this for so long, that even though it's like really scary to like put their name out there, to put their face out there, they're like, you know what? This is something that impacted me for 15 years. Like, if I can share my story and help someone else who's struggling, then it's worth it. And I think a really good example is there's a woman named Susan who actually had surgery for this issue. She's a really big runner. She could not solve her leaks with surgery. She tried everything, pelvic floor physio, all these different things. Uresta is the only thing that worked for her. And this was like a 15-year struggle for her. And
Mhm.
I believe she's in her early 50s. I hope I'm not putting her age out there wrong. But anyways, she put together this testimonial, and so many people saw it, and it sort of went viral. And I think the amount of women who messaged me and they're like, I bought this because of Susan's testimonial. Like, she really inspired me and she really resonated with me. And every single time I get an email like that, I forward it to her and I go, like, look at what you've done. And like she like every single time she's like, I am so happy. Like women are truly like willing to help each other. And so by fostering that sort of um relationship, I think we've also been able to sort of encourage the conversation and destigmatize it. The other thing I will say is we also started a private Facebook group. So we kind of were finding, women were messaging, they were asking us questions, a lot of even questions about purchasing it, like how do I insert it? What's the best position? I'm experiencing this. And we started this Facebook group in late August. And it's now like we're in early December. It's over almost 1,000 or over 1,000 people
Wow.
on it, women, and they're so highly engaged in talking about bladder leakage, talking about Uresta. Not all of them are Uresta users, but it made me realize like how many women are really looking for a community on this and looking to learn from other women and hear like what other solutions they're using and what's working. And so that has been something that's been really valuable. I wish we started it sooner. And to be honest, I thought it would be really hard to create a community online to actually get women talking. And it
Mhm.
has surpassed my expectations in every way. So yeah, I think like it's definitely a challenging topic, but as one customer said, it's the subject no one brings up, but then when someone does, no pun intended, like the floodgates open. So it's kind of just sparking the conversation.
Yeah, no, to your point, I think building a community around any health problem is important,
Yes,
right? Like the journey for anyone to figure out what's best for them is pretty personal.
for
And
sure.
you'll find a lot of users or a lot of patients try doing their own research. So having a community where, someone can openly ask questions or you can see questions that have been asked and just relate to other people's problems as it's your own. I think
Yeah.
that really, opens up a lot of just opportunities for them understanding the product a bit better, understanding their bodies a bit better, and actually getting towards the product. So it's good to hear that you've
Yeah.
had a lot of success with that private Facebook group.
Mhm.
Just to shift gears a bit, I wanted to know which countries US has already launched in right now.
Yeah, for sure. So today well, technically we're both in the US and Canada. So in Canada, we are an over the counter product. In the States, we're actually a prescription based product. So most of our kind of in our focus and our marketing has been in Canada just because we are trying to pursue a direct to consumer strategy.
Mhm.
That has been working very, very well for us. We would like to replicate that strategy in the US. We do have like a network of physicians in the US that are recommending Uresta and prescribing it. So it is like if there's a US customer on here that really wants to try it, they can definitely you can go to our website. There's like a brochure you can download. You can bring it to your doctor. It gives them all the information for you to get a prescription and how to fulfill it. But we would like to ultimately replicate what we're doing in Canada. So we actually just recently submitted an application with the FDA
Mhm.
to move over the counter in the States. So hopefully we can replicate what we're doing in Canada, but no certainty on it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We'll definitely get back to the whole, FDA approval in a minute, but just wanted to ask you about, any unique opportunities that you've seen in the US so far since the launch there.
So I will say honestly, we've just focused so much of our resources and time like on Canada. I would say like less than 5% of probably our time, if not even our capital is spent on the US other than, going through that FDA process which can be lengthy and very costly. But aside from that marketing wise, we've just really focused on Canada. I think
Mhm.
for anyone who is marketing directly to consumers would probably know this, but with Canada, like US is 10 times the size of Canada, right? So being an over the counter product, but then being a prescription product in the US can be very confusing from a marketing messaging standpoint. So we focus basically all of our marketing dollars on Canada. There's a lot of platforms out there. Like a really good example is podcasts or magazines or just general media. a lot of the influencers, a lot of the big influencers that you would see on Instagram, 80% of their audience just tends to be focused on the US because that's just where the population is. So that's kind of marketing channels we've stayed away from because we've just wanted to, it's just not worth our dollars, right?
Hmm.
To target US consumers. But I would say right now, just in Canada.
Hmm.
So maybe in a year from now, I can have a better response to that.
Yeah,
We'll have
makes
to do part
sense.
two
Totally. We'll definitely have you on, in a year again to just talk about
and tell
that.
you my learnings if we're able to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just a question about, building the actual device. So I think when you joined Uresta, the product was already ready, but I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who are considering building a medical device or a physical product in healthcare rather than a digital health solution. I think there's
Yeah.
a lot of questions around, when's the right time to actually, go for approvals, whether that's Health Canada or the FDA, and how
Mhm.
much testing and iterations needs to be done before even considering,
Yeah.
going for that kind of regulatory approval. Can you speak towards that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think my biggest advice would be if I mean, one, it's really hard to say without knowing the type of device, the class of device, right? So there's no real rule of thumb of when's the right time and how long it will take
Mhm.
and what the cost will be. I think one of the biggest things that I would recommend to anyone who is looking to commercialize a medical device is to engage a regulatory consultant, probably earlier than you think, because it's really important to document the development process when you start looking into supply chains, all of that. And also, while it's probably expensive and it probably seems daunting to engage a regulatory consultant earlier rather than later, it can also help you avoid going down the wrong path, which can be incredibly expensive. So that's something I would definitely recommend doing earlier on, even if it's just a conversation. But it's really important to be documenting that development process.
Hmm. That makes sense. And in terms of, there's a lot of people also, based in Europe that eventually want to have their products in North America. A
Yeah.
lot of companies will consider both Canada and the US. Is there a benefit to targeting one country before the other?
Not really. I would say they're pretty independent from each other. I mean, again, no rule of thumb, but Canada tends to be a little bit more quicker, can be cheaper, a little bit more straightforward than getting your product FDA cleared. I think ideally, if you have the resources to do both, I would start both in parallel. Ideally, if you don't, maybe it makes sense to start with Canada, and you can always apply those learnings for when you go for FDA approval as well.
Hmm. That totally makes sense.
Again,
And
regulatory consultant.
yeah,
Yeah.
are there any considerations for targeting the Canadian market considering our healthcare is completely public? Was there any considerations in that sense for having a medical device?
It's yeah, a good question. I think it'll be really interesting once we're in the US. I would say I think as a healthcare product, so um, we're sort of our in our early stages of awareness. It's growing, but we're technically so Uresta is covered by most private insurers, right?
Mhm.
So Canada Life, Manulife, that sort of thing. It's not always covered though, which is something that's a huge thorn in my side. And there's so many things that we could get into there. But I think a lot of people aren't used to paying, right? So there definitely as a direct to consumer product, I think sometimes it's frustrating for women. I mean, Uresta is actually fairly affordable. Like it's 139 to get started.
Mhm.
It's reusable. We do recommend replacing it. But once you're just buying like replacement sizes, so that 139 helps you kind of get your right size. It's like a sizing kit. But when you go to replace it's 89. And that's like all in, no tax. Like it's compared to what women are spending on other products, whether it's $100 an hour for physio or pads may seem cheap up front, but it
They're
adds
not.
up. Like there's studies that have said women will spend I think it was like 900 US a year on incontinence supplies, which is an insane amount of money. And it's not really improving the issue, right? So, or even like reusable absorbent underwear can be like $30 to $50 for a pair. So it's very affordable up front. And a lot of women say like they've saved money using Uresta, but I think it's still like that, like, why am I having to pay for this?
Mhm.
And I think, or shouldn't this be covered by my insurance? Of course, that's something we'd like to improve. But it'll be interesting to see, like, it's obviously too early to tell, but if we are successful in moving over the counter in the US, it will be interesting to see how that is perceived, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, obviously Uresta is a female-owned company, um, and you're targeting females in general. And like you've left a career in private equity. Obviously, that was probably a very comfortable career towards femtech, which historically has not had as much attention as the rest of the healthcare startups out there. I think I
Yeah.
saw a metric recently that says about 1% of all investments in healthcare are actually for femtech, and
Crazy.
I can imagine that if you dive deeper into that, most of those will be on reproductive health rather than all of the other problems that are out there. You
Yeah.
know, was it nerve-wracking for you to leave a comfortable career going into entrepreneurship, especially something that, historically has not had a lot of attention?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't do the research on funding into femtech. I think I really focused my research on understanding Uresta, how it worked, what the
Mhm.
clinical data was, what the alternatives were, how big the market was. And that gave me, I think, probably the most confidence. I think it gave me confidence, but I think it also made me feel like I wanted to problem solve it. I wanted to understand, like, why this company hadn't been able to generate revenue or be successful. I certainly did leave a cushy job. So did my business partner. I think we both were at a place in our lives where we had really good experience. We're like, worst case scenario, we go back to our old job in a few years. Things are going very well, so I don't see that happening. But I think anyone who is looking to take that leap into entrepreneurship, and I'm probably someone who's probably a little bit more risk averse, but I think having some really great experience, just so that if things don't work out, you can always pivot back. But that's just sort of my perspective
Mhm.
um, on things.
And I
But
think that makes a lot of sense. It's really just, a leap of faith, just trying something new. You never know until you've actually experienced it, right? Like, even
totally.
if it fails, there's a lot of learning that goes into that whole journey that, even your previous role, whether that's what you want to go back into, would, you'd benefit from that. Yeah.
Oh, and yeah, and the two of us, I will say, like, it's amazing how much we've learned over the last 3 years. Like, for someone like for me, like, a lot of my focus has been on marketing. I've learned so much about marketing. I've learned so much about consumer research, go-to-market strategy. My business partner is borderline an expert in healthcare regulatory approvals at this point.
Mhm.
Yeah, you definitely learn a lot, and you can apply those skills in a lot of different ways.
Mhm. And a lot of people I've met in my own journey, considering starting their own companies or
Yeah.
pursuing entrepreneurship, they're scared to join healthcare just because of all the niche terms out there and the regulatory concerns as well. But I feel that if you did want to join healthcare, it's very easy to learn those things. What's not easy is to actually learn the finance aspects of it or understand how to get a product to launch. I think that's the challenging part, which you don't really need a healthcare background to actually build something in healthcare. Now,
Yeah.
how has it been for you to actually, get familiar with all the terms and work in the healthcare space?
I mean, I think initially just even understanding the condition, like, once you read enough about it, it just starts to click, right? Like, I now I
Mhm.
understand it. I totally get it. The other thing is there's an expert for everything.
Yeah.
There is someone out there that can help you. It's amazing the people that you find along the way. You're not going to know it all, but um, I think knowing when to bring people in, and I think, like, the number one thing that as a company we've spent money on externally is probably regulatory consultants, because
Mhm.
that can make or break you as a healthcare company. But the other stuff, we're sort of figuring it out along the way. Um, and there's a lot of people out there that help and have the most niche expertise. I'm always blown away.
Mhm.
Yeah.
As a female entrepreneur in a female-owned company, do you feel that we've achieved equity in the femtech space? Do you feel that there are still challenges for either being a female entrepreneur or working in the femtech space to actually get a company off the ground?
We certainly have not. I mean, I think it's sort of shocking how behind we are. Um, I'm a part of a group called FemTech Canada, and there's a number of female entrepreneurs in there that are serving women's health needs, and so many of them are struggling for capital and the right investment. And like it does take a significant amount of capital to start healthcare companies. Like it's much easier to start, you know, looking around the room and trying to find, more standard products, like whether it's hand cream or beauty products or, shoes or fashion. Like it's a little bit
Mhm.
easier to get off the ground. Medical products, medical devices, all of that requires a significant investment. And it's sort of sad to see a number of these women really struggling to find the capital and the feedback that they're getting from investors, because I think there's this perception that it's a niche market. Like it's not a niche market. Like there's 50% of the population is female, and the changes, like women's health, like what women go through from their first period to menopause, to being pregnant, getting pregnant, like postpartum, like there's so many challenges. And like one of the things that we do is we send a survey to women right, like about 30 days after they've purchased Uresta, and we chat with them about like
Mhm.
what are some of the solutions that, or what are some of the issues they're having, and what are they looking for solutions for that they haven't been able to find. And a lot of it is like perimenopause symptoms, menopause symptoms, and it's unfortunate. And like you said, like a lot of funding has gone into like the fertility space or reproductive health, but I feel like there's so much untapped women's health needs, and it's really unfortunate, um, because I actually think there's just so much opportunity from an investment standpoint as well, and so many overlooked needs. So yeah, hopefully we see more of that. I think it's also a tough economy too. Like with
Mhm.
that as well makes it tough, but definitely nowhere near an equal footing.
Yeah, that's unfortunate to hear. You mentioned FemTech Canada has been a good resource. Over in the UK, I've heard of well, not a company, but an organization called FemTech World. They provided similar support to entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
giving female entrepreneurs that spotlight to just get, the word out about their products out there, to an audience that might be interested, or to other entrepreneurs and investors that might be,
Mhm.
helpful down the road to actually get that product to launch. Do you know any other resources that entrepreneurs can look out for?
Yeah, I mean, FemTech Canada is a great one. We're also a part of Mars, so the Mars Discovery District. Actually, I think that's how we met.
Yeah.
I definitely recommend, like, if you're able to get into their program, their Health Ventures program. I mean, they've been a great asset. I would say that and FemTech Canada have been great. I haven't looked into any US ones yet, but I would also just generally say, even as a female entrepreneur, like, you don't need to necessarily it doesn't necessarily need to be healthcare focused, but there's like a Toronto female founder group that I'm a part of. There's different, even just podcasts that I listen to that are like focused on like female founder businesses where they interview
Mhm.
CEOs and they talk about their biggest problems. Like I learn a lot from podcasts. I listen to a lot of entrepreneurial podcasts, and they're not always healthcare focused. Um, yeah, but I think these communities are great. Like we need for the Toronto female founders one and the femtech one, like we have a Slack channel, we ping each other, whether it's like we're looking for someone to help on finance, or we want help with an investor that we're targeting. And everyone really actually wants, like, it's not a competitive space. It's like everyone wants to help each other out, which is great.
Yeah, it's super collaborative. And that's the whole point of this podcast as well, like just to help other entrepreneurs or anyone interested in healthcare, anyone that's just, hesitant to make that leap into healthcare just because of what they've heard, to actually have the confidence to be able to reach out to people that are on the podcast, or, just understand that there are resources out there to get someone from, thinking about going into healthcare or femtech to actually doing it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If there's one thought that you can leave with the audience about building in femtech, what would that be?
I think entrepreneurship is really hard. You will be faced with challenges. I think being in femtech is so rewarding though. Like that is like, if you can find something where you feel truly like motivated, like I kind of mentioned earlier in this podcast, like I think we're very motivated by our customers, right? And like getting the messages from them. Um, and that's what I love about being in femtech is knowing that we're really making a difference in women's lives. And I
Mhm.
think the more that we've been involved, um, in this space and the more that we're like, even that Facebook group that I talked about, it's a lot about bladder leakage, but it's also a lot of women talking about, some of the ongoing issues they're having related to like perimenopause or menopause. And I think like we're really inspired right now to see how we can help bring other solutions to help these women. So it's a very rewarding space to be in.
Absolutely. I can totally agree on that.
Yeah.
What can we expect from Uresta over the next 12 months?
So, I mean, we're in that process right now with the FDA. I mean, I'm really hoping we can start to replicate what we're doing in Canada in the US.
Mhm.
So you'll have to stay tuned to anyone listening to follow us on social to stay tuned to see if that happens. But I think a lot more of what we're doing today in Canada, but on a larger scale, we are thinking through. I kind of highlighted this a little bit already, but how we can better support our customers, like what other pain points they're experiencing. And so we're doing a lot more research on how we can help support some of those issues that are quality of life issues, but not necessarily life threatening. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm excited for what's to come.
Yeah, me too. And what's the best way for listeners to reach out to you?
So they can reach out to us probably on Instagram. My Uresta is our Instagram handle. If you send us a DM, someone will check it, if not me. But we're pretty active on there and we're really good about responding. So that would probably be the best way.
Mhm. Well, yeah, listen, Lauren, it's been really nice to just hear about, your journey from investment banking to private equity to your, journey into entrepreneurship and learning about Uresta and the impact it's had so far in Canada. Hopefully, we'll see that same impact replicated in other countries around the world as well in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really nice having you today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you for inviting me.